Jesse, Tulip, and Cass take a break from their search for God, though their idea of relaxation is just about as dangerous as the rest of their life. And we meet Herr Starr of the Samson unit of the Grail, whose job it is to rid the world of competing narratives to Christ's godliness. And this guy likes his job way too much. It's Preacher, Season 2, Episode 7. Pig. Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to this week's review of Preacher. So yes, of course, lots of spoilers are ahead. Alright, so yes, the boys and girls stumble out of the last jazz club in New Orleans. Haven't found God yet, so what is a person to do after a long night on the streets? Take a break, relax, sure. And these guys' idea of relaxation, maybe not the same as the rest of us. Now last week, Cass did mention a place where you could get shot for money, or you get money or pay money. He wasn't entirely sure. Today, of course, we get to that place, the Hurt Locker. Very aptly named place, where you can bet, get shot by a gun, whose size of caliber determines the odds, and if you're able to get off the ground in 10 seconds, then you, my friend, are a winner. We got teeny tiny little guns, or we got really, really big guns. And of course, you know, we think if we're reading this, they're going to come in, they're going to get shot. Oh yeah, Cass, of course, he can take bullets. This is their way of having a good time. No! They're not just doing it straightforward, and that's what was so delicious about this scene, is they're going in to rob them. They're going in to take advantage of this particular situation, and they play it so beautifully as Tulip and Cass, the girlfriend and boyfriend, and they play it wonderfully back and forth in the expectations. And then, of course, we've got Jesse coming in as the preacher, condemning everyone and only boosting up the expectations and the odds. The moment there when Jesse mentions about getting the biggest caliber they got if you don't like life, and we have Cass kind of pop up behind Tulip, was like, what? Why are you suggesting that? It was so perfect. Now, the real question is he playing this actually to Jesse, or is it part of the act? You know, and I think that's one of the nice things. It plays perfectly into the act, and yet he's also kind of looking at Jesse like, you know, maybe we've had a couple of moments here, and you're still a little upset with me. Is that maybe why you're pushing it quite so far? It was a wonderful, perfect little setup there. Now, Cass does get a very nice kiss from Tulip for his risking of life there, which, you know, he enjoyed quite a bit. I think he was kind of leaning into that maybe a little bit more than he needed to. Jesse certainly took note of that. So we got that little competing bit there. If you're going to pick the big gun, then I'm going to enjoy kissing your girlfriend, who I'm secretly in love with, and the I love you too on his side. A little bit more truth than just playing the part. But he shot, blood splatter, and everyone goes, and of course it's murder, and everyone, it was so wonderfully done. It was the perfect thing that we would expect these three to do it. They're not going in just to danger. They're going into danger and effing with it, and twisting it around. And I thought it was a beautifully laid scene. Even how afterwards, when Tulip pulls out the little IV bag, kind of like a little emergency kit for Cass there, just sucked it up right there. It was just, you know, it was beautifully done. It was well framed. It was a lot of fun. And it builds wonderfully into the next scenes where we start to see the difficulties that Cass is having with Dennis. Dennis didn't have a very particularly enjoyable look seeing Cass on the ground like that. And then, of course, also feeding into the wonderful relationship that Jesse and Tulip have. Even when they're fighting, they can have fun, but they're both dealing with their own little things. Tulip, of course, dealing with the PTSD of her encounter with the Saint. And Jesse, you know, dealing with the idea that a little bit of his soul is quite literally gone. Now that tension between Cass and Dennis is sort of pretty much Cassidy's little mini arc throughout this episode. Him facing the idea of Dennis's mortality, of his son's mortality. Dennis is dying. I mean, one, he's getting old, but he's actually got heart issues. And here he is seeing Cassidy, who as he has grown up hasn't changed at all, but the absent father hasn't really been attentive. Now, not only the same age as he's always been, but getting shot and getting back up for someone who's dying, that's quite appealing. And I do have to say, just for a moment, the French professor was hilarious. How he is just laying down the bar and just, hey, I was overhearing and I might be able to, it was so perfect. It was there's a lot of that deus ex machina that happens throughout this show, of just wildly coincidental things happening for our characters' benefit. And this certainly fits with that. It's totally in line with the whole theme of the show, and it pulls it off nicely. But I thought this was just the perfect thing. I mean, literally what you need rising up from the background to be translation, so that Cassidy can finally figure out what it is that Dennis has been saying all of this time. Yes, Cass has been an absent father, but he now has the chance to maybe give something back to his son. But he won't do it. And we know that he won't do it. I mean, vampire is not, I'm sure, a very good life choice overall. Cassidy has seen a lot of the downside of that. So his response to Dennis, I think, was quite appropriate. But what we're going to see is this is going to open up a lot more tales, a lot more stories, because there now has to be that moment where Cassidy has to explain to Dennis why, while dying is a horrible thing, as he saw in the hospital there on his way out of the morgue, Cass. Oh, it happens a lot to me. Yeah, that was perfect. But now he has to face that reality. Does he let his son die, or does he really explain the reasonings why he would never make him into a vampire, as he very vehemently put to Dennis right there in the bar. Now, Tulip, of course, dealing with the PTSD of encountering the saint. Nightmares, seeing, I love the imagery, fingers falling like French fries on TV. That's always what they do in the show. Ooh, golden delicious French fries tingling down. Yeah, exactly like those fingers. That whole dream sequence was beautiful. One, because you think that it's not a dream. And it's carried wonderfully. The sounds, all you're hearing is like just that sound of the stove, of the gas on the stove in the background. All the rest of the sounds heightened up. The checking of things and rechecking. I mean, she's playing that hyper tense post-traumatic feeling, I think, really well. And then adding on top the sort of supernatural of the window opening back up, the gas turning back on. It played very naturally before. Now you had the supernatural, now it gets creepy. And then, of course, the saint reappearing. Beautiful shot when she looks down, when he first picks her up there and he looks down the arm, and you just see that shot of I can't really put it right there, but it's like just right down his arm into the camera. It was a beautiful, haunting shot, really well done. But this is, fear of death, very straightforward. Seeing the bullet holes through the fridge. This is what Tulip is really battling with. And I think this is that type of fear is a new experience for her. But luckily, she has encountered a way to deal with it. And going back to the club, heckling all of them about what they were there for and how they ripped off their money, and then puts it right in. Do you want to earn it back? Perfect. Really was. I mean, if you're going to get over the fear of getting killed, being shot in the chest, with the bulletproof vest on, of course, that is the way to do it. So, while it was twisted, some great dream sequences, I think Tulip found what she needed in order to get past it. And made a few dollars on the side, too. Now, Jesse, not really a whole lot for him this week. Obsessed with finding God, of course, inquiring in with the Doomsday Corner soothsayer there, who I loved. Just wants a beer. All of his signs is, the world is ending, so how about having a beer? was perfect, was beautiful, and really just a way for Jesse to bounce off a few of his ideas. Get the idea of what is the expectation? Why do we think the world is ending? Well, it's just metaphor. I love that whole bit, how he kind of goes in and explains how much people are just looking for an excuse in order to focus their anxieties on it. The fact that what people are most afraid of are themselves. And that's pretty much what their projection is onto him. He's kind of the conduit for that. So I thought that was kind of a cool scene from the human psychology standpoint. But of course, what this boils down to ultimately is Jesse kind of releasing that idea of, hey, I just sold 1% of my soul, or my friend did. And that's keeping him. That's why he didn't send the saint down to hell. He can't send part of his own soul down to hell, but now he's absent of it. Is it the right thing to do? This is going to be obviously something we're going to be dealing with for a little while. I'm sure he will re-encounter his 1% because, and I've been thinking about this all week, little quick aside, that armored car, a lot of souls in that armored car. A lot of money in there. So don't you think that the Japanese would probably have that sucker GPS'd? I get a feeling they're going to place a high priority in finding out where that armored car is. Not really expecting what it is that's inside. But we know that the saint won't be held there for too long. Tulip thinks that he got sent to hell, which of course he didn't. So you know when he comes back, there's going to be a little question going on between her and Jesse. However, also, our crazed corner man's last statement there is, if you're looking for signs of the end of the world, men selling part of their souls for cash is probably a pretty good sign. That and the whole other listing, Cubs winning, Trump, pigs flying, those things, All right. I was just waiting for the end. Herr Starr. The opening sequence, when we had the Flash Japan, when we pan down to the actual pig there, super quick as soon as the episode opens, I thought that was a bit too much on the nose. And I do have to say, the shot of the girl's reaction was perfect, because when she turned, she didn't look quite right at camera, but it was kind of just to the side, but it looked like a camera. And since we had sort of that voyeur look through the window, it was almost like she was reacting to us as the audience. And I thought that was handled really well. Now, considering that it was to a floating pig, I think it was perhaps a little much. That would be startling, I think. Quixotic, maybe fearful, possessed, and running away, but not the type of fear that you stand and scream with. I mean, it was an effective scene. She was a great screamer, but maybe a little bit over the top. However, this does serve as our introduction to Herr Starr and his way of dealing with all of these situations. Really, and the pig, again, while concurrent for now and does serve its example, this is the conduit to we get to really be introduced to Herr Starr as the character. Pretty much the flashback to 2004, his introduction into the Grail, and of course, the testing protocol. And I am, of course, going to name that our scene of the week. And yes, okay, technically it's a sequence, or possibly more of a montage, but it's my rules, so I can assign them as I wish. Now, caveat, oddly, it was almost the opening sequence. It was almost the Hurt Locker scene, which was beautifully done. But as a concise way of telling everything you need to know about a character, I thought this was perfectly done and twisted as only Preacher can. Now, when we do, of course, first meet Herr Starr back in 2004 in his introduction to the Grail, his immediate response about wanting it to be in a brothel. Where's the brothel? The staffed exclusively with Ukrainian runaways. It was his approach was immediately set up. But again, that whole testing sequence put it down perfectly. This is a man who is obsessed with what he wants. He thinks outside of the box. He has no consideration for anyone else around him, which in a way makes him perfect for what the Grail wants. The first shot of him in the test with the little nipple necklace. establishes the kind of psychosexual nature of his approach towards things anyway, if the brothel idea hadn't already. So we get that image. We have the almost bored approach with dealing with this testing, like it's just an imposition on his time. Even how he is, from that very moment, kind of interviewing and testing the Grail itself. The argument about getting his parking validated is so weird and so unexpected. You kind of have to deal with it. Then there's the self-pleasuring to serve as a distraction, which no one else would think about, and yet quite effective. But that's exactly the thing. That makes people nervous, and thus they are not expecting that type of response. Why seduce when you can threaten? The whole nuts electrolysis, which he seemed to be enjoying way too much. Everyone else is freaking out, and he's just like, hey, man, this is like Tuesday to me. And then followed up with, of course, why compete when you can just kill your competition? It was perfect. It was beautiful. Of course he was going to win. This was merely a formality to him. And it ends perfectly when he's up there with this boss and he learns he's going to be this right-hand man, and it just, shh, no you're not. It was just... That was not unexpected. When they had the shot by the balcony, it was like almost a moment before it happened. All I'm thinking is he going to push him over? Yes, he is. Yes, of course he's going to. And just walks in and takes control. Herr Starr is no one's right-hand man. So, beautiful scene, beautiful sequence, really illustrates exactly the type of individual that he is. So, not unexpected at all, he would poison the whole village in order to cover up the whole floating pig incident. And the last start from the invalid scientist about hydrogen, meat balloon, I think was the line that was used. That was, okay, that's good science. Oh, you're a scientist? Then shut up. Anyway, it was a perfect scene. It was a wonderful sequence. It introduced us officially to Herr Starr and did it in a manner that, man, I cannot wait to see him again. All right, just a couple of quick things. One, the carts picking up the passed out and the dead and using cattle prods to tell the difference. That is a job that shouldn't exist, and yet in some places really, really does need to be there. Oh, and then the whole introduction to Herr Starr when we first see him in Vietnam, and they've got that kind of 70s villain music going on. Oh, that set the scene perfectly. All right, so I think that's going to wrap things up for us for this week. Now, a little announcement. Wednesday, that is tomorrow from when this gets out, August 2nd, 6 p.m. Pacific, I am doing a live broadcast with Mark over at Enchantment of Eternity, and we are going to be talking about this week's episode of Game of Thrones, Episode 3, The Queen's Justice. Of course, you guys watched my review, right? Anyway, so we're going to be doing a little live broadcast. We're going to be talking about the show, get to go a little bit more in depth, and we'll be answering questions. So keep an eye on my Twitter feed, and I will put out the link to that show for Wednesday. It is in the description for Game of Thrones review from last night, but I'll go ahead and tweet that out a couple of times. So keep an eye on the Twitter feed, and you won't miss it. Also, I am looking to do a little change here in the way of new branding. The channel DW Jakes was always kind of meant as a placeholder, and I'm looking to kind of, change it up, make it something a little bit more official. So I'll let you guys know as time goes on. If you have any suggestions, go ahead and throw those down in the comments section. But I'll keep it up. It's not going to change the channel at all. Subscriptions should all be the same. It will just sort of change some of its identifiers and how you find it. So there you go. That's it. So if you did enjoy this review, please hit that like button. Thoughts, ideas, comments, you know how much I like to hear from you. Please put them down in the section below. You can always catch me on Twitter and Instagram, and that's where I will tweet out a link for this Game of Thrones show. And you can do that by catching me right at Darren Jakes. Now, please subscribe if you are not a subscriber. That way you won't miss any of these Preacher reviews. Plus, like I said, Game of Thrones, and this fall we've got a huge slate. We're doing Inhumans. We are doing Mr. Robot. We've got Walking Dead. Plus, we have Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. They're all awesome shows. Don't miss any of them, and you won't if you're a subscriber. Do that by clicking my face right there. And I'll throw up our latest review for Game of Thrones right here. You can go ahead and check that out. All right, so that's it for me. I am D, and I'm out of here. Catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.